Coming up, drugs hidden in vibrators, animals taped into clothing, skulls used for magic, and more. Join us as we have a look at some of the weirdest smuggling attempts ever. Pigeons. An Australian traveler was caught trying to smuggle a breeding pair of pigeons overseas. This could have had severe consequences if he wasn't apprehended. But fortunately, his hiding method wasn't exactly bulletproof. The man tried to hide the live pigeons in padded envelopes, and then stuffed each of those envelopes into his legs. He then put on a pair of tights in order to hold his hostages in place and pulled up his pants. He was, of course, caught and quickly exposed, because you can probably imagine how difficult it's going to be to keep not one, but two birds quiet while they're crammed beside your thighs. Now, we imagine that the security monitor image was probably a double take for the surveillance personnel. The man flew in from Dubai and is facing charges relating to the destruction of habitat. And for that, he could face up to 10 years in prison with a fine of over $100,000. A vibrator. Now, when it comes to smuggling drugs, it's really important to be creative. The penalties vary depending on what country that you're landing in, but the consequences of getting caught tend to lead to these extreme and sometimes not so clever attempts. Sure, the money could be good, but is it really worth it? An anonymous tip would lead to the arrest of a 26-year-old Ukrainian woman flying home from New Delhi. She stashed some hashish in a place that she thought no one would touch: her vibrator. The small bag was placed inside of the sex toys battery compartment, but unfortunately for Svetlana, she misjudged how thorough and curious the Kiev airport officers could be. A 76-year-old man aroused the suspicion of customs officers in Rome when he revealed that his carry-on backpack was full of oranges. The man claimed that he needed to keep up his vitamin C levels for the long flight. And while this may be a useful thing to do during a long stay on a plane, it's not exactly why he had all of that citrus. Officers would discover that the oranges had been hollowed out and then stuffed with cocaine. About 5 million euros worth of cocaine, that is. The man was flying from Buenos Aires in Argentina to his home in the Netherlands, but was detained in Rome and then charged with international drug trafficking. Airport security was primed for the arrest, possibly because of another recent drug shipment that they had interrupted. In that one, 5 Italians had hidden over 250 kilograms of cocaine in the trunks of tropical plants, and were caught in the very same airport. A Chilean man went to a fairly extreme degree in order to try and smuggle drugs into Barcelona. His leg was broken, and the surrounding cast plaster was actually made out of cocaine itself. While it might be a difficult situation to explain to customs officials when the drug dog starts barking at your wheelchair, the officers were working with the theory that the man broke his leg intentionally, all in order to fit into the custom cast. Bringing in food across borders can be a little bit of a hassle, but it becomes a lot more intense when you use those ingredients to smuggle drugs. In 2014, a Guatemalan man would be arrested in Newark for carrying what appeared to be a bag of chocolate chips. Technically, this wasn't really far from the truth. They were actually cocaine chips. 118 of them that were worth about $50,000 US. Having such a specific and well-handled bag tipped off the authorities. That same year, a man would try to fly into JFK Airport with more than 7 pounds of cocaine stuffed into 3 slabs of goat meat. While this certainly would have disguised the smell of the drug to a person, airport dogs aren't easily as fooled. But wait, there's more. This crime happened nearly beside a man who tried to smuggle 18 pounds of cocaine in bags of custard mix. Now, these attempts may seem a little bit off the wall, and in the case of 18 pounds, a little bit ambitious. It's a small mercy that no one accidentally consumed any of these expensive and surprising ingredients, but these attempts would lead to jail time along with heavy fines. Heineken. Saudi Arabia is considered to be a dry country, and it's not just the desert. Legally, alcohol is banned in the entire nation. However, there are many tourists and locals within the borders who don't mind a cold beer or two. It's just somewhat hard to acquire. This makes the trade of alcohol smuggling an extremely lucrative business, especially considering how wealthy many members and visitors of the country are. Well, there is always a risk in smuggling. A man was caught with 48,000 cans of Heineken trying to cross the border. While he didn't get away with it, the plan was beautiful in its simplicity. He disguised the cans as Pepsi, a much more legal import. After a small search, though, it became clear that the man had more than cola in the truck, and authorities cut off the fake wrappers in order to expose the hooch. In a similar but much more inventive attempt, a man would be caught with 12 bottles of liquor sewed into his pants. The man would be stopped as he walked along the 16-mile causeway that linked Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and ordered to lift up his robe. Apparently, he was walking rather suspiciously. And who wouldn't have a little bit of trouble smuggling that much liquor inside their pants? A gang would be caught smuggling liquor into Saudi Arabia in a way that you probably wouldn't try at home. 360 bottles of alcohol were stuffed into the tires of 3 cars. The first car made a survey of the area, then being followed by 2 other cars. Now, you can just imagine that driving with liquor stuffed inside of your tires instead of air could make for a pretty rough ride. There were 3 attempts at smuggling that were apprehended, and one of the cars also had bottles that were stuffed into the fuel tank. You don't really need to be a mechanic to see that something is odd about this 3-car convoy, and the authorities at the border easily apprehended the would-be smugglers. Saudi Arabia takes their sobriety very seriously, and if you're caught smuggling liquor into the country, whether you're a local or a foreigner, you can face jail time and actual public flogging. Understandably, the World Health Organization estimates that the rate of alcohol consumption per capita in the country is just 0.2 liters per adult, which is actually one of the lowest in the world. That being said, all of that consumption would be illegal, so the numbers might somewhat be inaccurate. Smuggling Skulls. In 2006, a woman that was flying from Haiti to Miami would be detained because she attempted to bring in an entire human skull. She told authorities that the skull, which was complete with hair, skin, and teeth, was to be used for voodoo purposes. This answer, while it may seem normal to a skull smuggler, didn't exactly wow the authorities. Most airports will not actually allow the passage of human remains without a death certificate, and the reason for the relocation. Upon examination, the head is thought to have been from an African American man who passed away within the year. And that's odd and potentially criminal. She said that she purchased the skull from a witch doctor. Needless to say, the woman was unable to practice her voodoo on this skull. A biology teacher flying from Denver to Boston would be stopped because his luggage contained several seals' heads. Even though it was a domestic flight, federal law prohibits flyers from transporting wildlife, whether they be alive or dead, without a permit. The man wanted to use these in his class, which is a little more understandable than, magic. But because he didn't have a permit, the seal's head was confiscated, and the man could face fines of up to $20,000. In 2010, a man in Mexico City would be detained due to a suspicious bulge in his shirt. While the authorities thought that they might find drugs, they were somewhat surprised by what was actually revealed. The bulge was a girdle wrapped around the man's waist, and within it, 18 tiny 6-inch monkeys. By the time the authorities would catch him, sadly 2 of the monkeys had perished. Then, in 2012 in Amsterdam, a German couple would be returning from a trip to Peru, and it seemed like they had really fallen in love with the country. In fact, they were so in love that they tried to bring back a decent-sized part of it. The couple attempted to hide over 200 live tarantulas in their shoes. Oh, and some in their clothing. In other selections of their luggage contained crickets and millipedes, possibly for feeding the arachnids that they were smuggling to begin with. The Netherlands has strict import laws, and as you may imagine, they were not so keen on hundreds of gigantic foreign spiders breaking into the country. All of the legalities aside, however, the untold victims of this story are the other passengers on the flight, who were unknowingly close to a truly alarming amount of giant spiders. In Thailand, a simple X-ray would foil the attempt of a smuggler trying to get a live tiger cub over the border. The Bangkok airport would scan the woman's luggage and found a sedated tiger stuffed next to a stuffed tiger inside of her luggage. Now clearly, the woman wanted authorities to believe that both animals were stuffed, but the slow heartbeat was actually picked up by their machines. While the woman denied any knowledge of the live tiger, a living great cat in your backpack is not one of those things that are easy to lie about. At an Indonesian customs check, port authorities discovered a terrible smuggling ring. 24 endangered cockatoos were cruelly stuffed into plastic water bottles and unable to move. The yellow cockatoo is listed as critically endangered. Each of the birds would have been worth $1,000 alone. Fortunately for the animals, the smugglers were caught. The birds were cut out of their plastic cages, and then they received emergency medical attention. As of right now, there are only 7,000 of these birds left on the planet, and we hope that justice was served to the smugglers. We start off easy with the story of James Russell, who was spending some time away from home in the Olympic Correction Center in Washington. Russell decided he wasn't happy with his accommodations anymore, and that he would get out of the minimum security facility with no more than a mild plan to borrow a phone from the first person that he came across. The only problem was, the first person that Russell came across was a guard who worked at the prison.